Good evening. My name is Megan Myers. I'm doing my study on the use of reinforcers to motivate students with challenging behaviors. A little bit about me. I have a BA in elementary education and early childhood. I have an endorsement in special education and also in reading K-8. I've been teaching for 11 years. All those years I've been working with special education, but 7 of those were in preschool, and the last 4 have been with students with severe needs in a self-contained classroom. So the problem I'm focusing on in this study is basically challenging behaviors. How can we get students with severe disabilities to use appropriate behaviors when learning? So how can I motivate them to learn? So challenging behaviors are difficult when working with any student, and behaviors are so unique to each student. When you hear behaviors, a lot of people will typically think physical aggression, like the biting, the hitting, the pulling hair. But behaviors can also be to gain attention, and it could be like, I'm going to hug my friend over here to avoid working, or just to get their attention because they'll find it funny and giggle. I've had a student in the past that would gain attention by pinching. And I've also have students that will just sit there and zone out to avoid anything that they can. And they're completely content doing that. So it's just very unique to each individual. And then talking with many colleagues and just with my experience, I've noticed that with students with severe disabilities also tend to have behaviors. So I feel like they kind of go hand in hand with one another. So that's kind of why I chose this. This is the area I'm working in. All my students have behaviors, but my one student that I used for this study has an actual behavior intervention plan, so a BIP. And he, I would say, would have my most extreme behaviors. So I also find that behaviors are probably my weakness in my teaching area. They're just so different, and so many things can change with them, and they're so fast, like you just have to be on top of it all the time. And just curiosity in this area. It's very unique. It's very intriguing to me to kind of know why students are behaving the way that they are. So through my research of this, 3 articles really stood out to me the most. So Carr, Alter, and Hall all basically kind of focused on how students with challenging behaviors are being limited in the gen ed setting. And they're limited because of these behaviors. So those behaviors are to the point where they cannot access the gen ed setting because either it's affecting their academics or they're too big of a distraction to be in the same classroom, or even safety. So they really all touch base on this. And it goes from missing out on school activities throughout the day, loss of instruction time, so then they're not progressing academically. They're limited socially within their family functions, within the school, their school community, and within the community that they live in. There's a lot of stigma and I think assumptions with any individual that has behaviors. If people see that in public, I think it's very easy for them to assume what they should be doing or what should be done or why they're doing that when they don't have the whole story. So I think a lot of parents will typically not take their children out in the community, or they'll miss out on things even with family aspects because they don't want to deal with it or being judged. So the kids then, in general, don't really have a sense of belonging anywhere, really. And then Alter also talked about how teachers are finding different jobs in this field. And a lot of it comes back to behaviors because they are mentally exhausting and draining, can be physically demanding on you, mentally and emotionally. And I would say it's true. They say their turnover rate typically is high, and about 5 years was the average that a teacher would stay in this certain area in teaching. So I just thought that was very interesting. So the purpose of my study is to decrease challenging behaviors when I'm implementing a token reward system using these reinforcements as well as positive praise. I feel there's a lot of, or not a lot, but I feel like there was a lack of research done with students with severe disabilities, as well as challenging behaviors. I could find things on challenging behaviors with students with mild disabilities, or even students that were academically okay, didn't necessarily have a disability other than just their behaviors. And I just feel there wasn't a lot with severe needs. And I just found that kind of intriguing. And a lot was focused on just autism. And I'd be very curious about other disabilities and if there's any factors there. Anyway, so using this token reward system and the positive praise, I'm saying that the challenging behaviors will decrease, and instruction time will increase, basically. So I'm going to be motivating the students to be learning and using appropriate behaviors, so that way they will get their reinforcer, their reward. So student A is the student I'm using. He's a male Hispanic. He's diagnosed with autism, ADHD, and Soto syndrome. He has an IEP, so an individual education plan, and a BIP, a behavior intervention plan. He also struggles with communication. He can say about 3 words per sentence. He uses a lot of visuals in talking and going throughout his day. His pronunciation of things is very hard to understand. So even though he can say 3 words per sentence, I've had him now for 2 years that I can have an idea of what he's saying, but those visuals are still really important for him to just help him communicate his basic needs and wants. So his behaviors are typically to gain attention and also to escape work. And his behaviors can look like eloping, grabbing other items, hitting, pushing tasks away, screaming. And those are mainly the ones that you see when he's trying to escape working. And then I also noted about the materials that were used in this, just because I wanted to touch base that there's so many visuals. Any student with special needs, I would say severe needs, and depending on their communication level, visuals are going to be really helpful and most likely are already in place. So in the top middle is part of his visual schedule in the day, and to the right of that is the expectations that are gone over every day with him. So week 1 of this study, I did a preference assessment. This basically was where I sat down with him and either gave him toys or let him choose toys. And I would write down if he approached it or did not, and then how long he would play with those items. After that week, then I would look at all that data and determine what his highly preferred items for rewards were be. And that was what I put on his choice board then. I also, during instruction time on math, is where I got data about his behaviors and also his compliance during the week. And I did a weekly average then to get a baseline to see where he's at for compliance. And then his behaviors went into a functional behavior analysis where I focused on what the behavior was, what happened immediately before the behavior, and what happened after the behavior. So this helped me determine why he was acting the way he was, which in this case was to avoid work. So weeks 2 through 6, I implemented the intervention. So the token board, he really likes Mickey Mouse and likes to play with iPad. So to the right, you can see the token board. He had to earn 5 Mickeys to get his iPad. His choice board is below. It says, I want, and then he gets to pick between those 7 items for his preferred reward. If he does not get all 5 Mickeys, he does not get his preferred reward. So then again, we just took data on what his behaviors were during instruction time. I did the token board throughout. I also gave positive praise every 2 minutes, if not more, throughout the whole thing. I also made observations and noted those about what was happening within the classroom, that could affect or trigger his behavior for that particular day. And I also did teacher interviews at the end, and we kind of talked about a work reward system as well as positive praise, and just their feelings about teaching in this area in challenging behaviors. So my findings with the teacher interviews was the work schedule was very important. If you don't have that place and you're not consistent, you're going to struggle implementing anything. So really having a sound, structured setup is very important for this. Another thing was each individual is unique. So Mrs. Hansman said what works great for one student may not work for another. And that is 100%, I would say, I would agree with her 100% there. And then Mrs. Fink said if they don't have a reason to learn it, then they won't see the point in learning it. So if they don't like to do it and don't understand why they're doing it, they're not going to want to. So we have to figure out how to get them to motivate. So that's where the hope of the token reward system would play an effect. But both teachers talked about being stressed, about looking for different jobs while they were teaching this. Both of these teachers are still working with severe needs students, and they have been working with them for more than 5 years each. But they have definitely looked for other jobs to get out of this area. So that I'm sure will eventually happen. But basically what it came down to, they said if you have a system in place and it is working, keep it. And you have to keep it consistent. That was such a huge thing, and that they're so unique. Those are mainly the big chunks from that. So my weekly data, you can see this figure goes each week, and it has everything numbered out. So I did 15-minute intervals of just my 15-minute working of math with this student. And you can see how many times he was on compliance each day, the weekly total, and then the weekly average. So as you can see that this student did have a decrease in challenging behaviors and an increase in appropriate behaviors when learning. So this bar graph just kind of gives a better visual of the weeks and where the student was showing compliance. So as you can see, week 1 was the baseline, excuse me, and then week 2, I think he went down like 1 percentage point. And then after that, he has increased in showing his compliance and showing appropriate behaviors during that time. So overall, I would say that this intervention was successful and it's still in place. So I kind of connected this with operant conditioning, which is basically you are rewarding the behavior. So when student A is showing appropriate behaviors, he was rewarded with his toy of choice, basically. And we were increasing that each week. And positive praise was given immediately when appropriate behavior was shown. And then after earning those tokens on his token board, he received that reward of his choice. So implications, basically the impacts on student, hopefully this will help show progress in his academics. It will expose him to different settings, excuse me, school, home, community, building motivation externally and internally, and building a sense of belonging. With parents, I'm hoping this can be a guide for them of how to start maybe creating their own system at home, and also able for them to get out in the community. And then the school just to have a better understanding of students like these and how to help motivate. The limitations, though, with this study is that it is only limited to one student, which then it just will be hard to replicate per student because they're so unique. Each student may have a different aspect or a different motivator than maybe what student A had. So there's just limited information in this area, and there's so many variables like the different disabilities, different triggers, different motivation. I hope that there can be more research done in this area with severe disabilities as well as challenging behaviors. So I would hope that that can be done. And that is everything that I have. So thank you for your time.